Light's obviously very important in photography. I suppose most of us probably take most of our photographs in daylight, which is great, but the problem with daylight is that we can't really control it. You're dependent on things like the weather, the time of day, the time of year, and these things you can't really change. So I wanted to show you a couple of things that we can do indoors to control the light and modify it. Now, when we're inside under low lighting, a lot of us tend to use the flash that's built into our cameras, which is fine, but there are certain drawbacks with that. So if I take a photograph of the little still life I've got set up on the table here, I've got the camera set with the pop-up flash ready. The photograph itself looks like it was taken with a flash. If you look at those very hard shadows around the edge of the cup. Another slight issue that we've got, and this isn't due to the flash, you can get this in any sort of lighting, is if you look at the photograph that we've got there, we're photographing something white on something else that's white. We've got the cup and the egg cup on that paper there. But if you look at the photograph, it doesn't look particularly white. It kind of looks a bit grey. And the reason for that is the camera has been designed to expect to see dark and light in the same photograph, you know, like a range of contrast. And if you give it something like this to photograph, light on light, it gets a bit confused and it sort of underexposes slightly, so your pictures come out a bit dark. You also get the same problem if you're photographing dark things against dark backgrounds, and you often find that the camera gets a bit confused when you're photographing very, very contrasty images, you know, like at sunset or something like that. So there's various ways around this, but the easiest one is to use this little button on top here. It's this little plus minus button. That's called exposure compensation. And basically what it means is you can tell the camera, even when it's set on automatic, to deliberately under or overexpose a bit. Deliberately to make the pictures a little bit brighter or a little bit darker, so you get them how you want them, not how the camera thinks they should be. So if I take that photograph again, and this time I'm going to overexpose by 2 stops. So I just click my little wheel when I press that button and go to +2. You can look up how to do it on your own camera. Take the photograph, and that one looks kind of whiter. The other problem with a built-in flash is that it's attached to the top of the camera. So no matter where I stand with the camera, the light is always going to come from the same direction as the camera, which is very limiting really. So if we can use a second light source, then that gives us more creative possibilities. So I'm going to switch off the built-in flash and I'm going to use another light source here. I could use the light from the window, but the problem with that is I can't move it around very easily. So I'm actually using a flash gun on a stand. Now, if you haven't got anything like that, and you probably haven't, then you can use something like a desk lamp, an angle poise lamp. For photographing small stuff like this, it works very well. So let's try a photograph. Okay, you can see the light is coming from the right hand side because all the shadows are going over towards the left. It shows the cup and the egg cup kind of much more three-dimensionally than before. The sort of light we've got in that photograph, photographers sometimes describe as hard lighting, and that's when the light rays are coming in fairly parallel. You get this on a sunny day. So if we look at the shadows on that photograph, you can see the edges of the shadows are quite hard. We get a sort of hard silhouette, which looks okay, but sometimes we want to soften those shadows a little bit, and we can do that by scattering those parallel light rays. So to scatter this light, I'm going to use a diffuser, which is just a piece of tracing paper stuck to a piece of clear plastic. If you want to make one at home, bit of tracing paper and stick it to an old empty picture frame, that works fine. So if I put that in between my flash gun and my still life. So if we look at that photograph, you can see the edges of the shadows are much softer, and the way that the light moves from light to dark is much more gradual. And that's more like the sort of light that you get on a cloudy day. So that's one way we've got of adjusting the light. Another way we've got is actually to change the direction of the light. So if I move that light around the subject and take a few photographs, you can see what I'm talking about. So by changing the direction of the light, although I've not moved those objects, they look completely different in each photograph. So when we start to photograph either people or objects, portraits or still lives, we need to start to think about how we want that object or person to look, and how we shine the light on them can have a big impact on that. To give you an example of this, I've got a glass here with some red juice in it, and I'm going to take a photograph with the flash pointing straight towards that. Well, that looks okay. The exposure's about right, it's not too bright and not too dark, but it isn't particularly interesting. So we have to think about what is it about this thing that we're trying to show, this glass, and it's the red liquid inside it. It looks quite nice. So if we can shine the light through it, that might start to look more interesting. So to do this, I'm going to move the flash back. So instead of pointing towards the glass, it's pointing towards that white paper at the back there. So what we've essentially done is we've turned that into the light source, because the light's going to bounce off that and then come through the juice. So let's try another photo. And I think you'll agree that second photograph looks a lot better. So in order to learn about how light works, this is a really good way of doing it. Get yourself a light source, get yourself a desk lamp, get various different objects and just try pointing the light at it different directions from different angles. Take photographs, experiment, mess about, and you very quickly learn how the lighting works.